Hey friends, welcome to Dishing on Divorce Next Chapter on WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network Radio, Podcasts, and TV. I'm your host, Lisa Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, and life transitions. And I'm also a divorced mom of 3 now grown kids. As a recovering lawyer, a current educator, a spiritual counselor, and a co-parenting coach, I'm committed to transforming the divorce experience for everyone involved. So, who comes to see me? Many of my clients come to me at the earliest stages of their divorce process, before they've taken any steps forward. And maybe they're just thinking about it. Maybe they're trying to decide, should I or shouldn't I? And my role in these situations is to walk them through the process and help them determine what's right for them, whether it means divorce or staying together. I currently have a client who has completely shifted her mindset and is working on strategies to support the marriage rather than leave. And this is giving her some internal strength. So, in that same vein, there is something really powerful called discernment counseling. It's something I didn't know anything about until I got into this business. And it's a very specific process where a couple explores various scenarios over the course of a set period of time to determine what's right for them. And today's guest is Dr. Ginny Wright, who is a discernment counseling master practitioner. Welcome, Ginny.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And I'd really like to introduce you to my audience. So I'm going to give a little bit of your bio, and then we'll jump right in. Dr. Ginny Wright is a clinical psychologist who co-founded Drs. Laporte, Wright, and Associates, PC, in 1994. She's been doing this work a while. Originally trained with a focus on child and family clinical psychology, she now dedicates most of her work to helping couples. Specifically, she offers discernment counseling to couples on the brink of divorce and is one of 6 therapists to earn the distinction of Discernment Counseling Master Practitioner. Ginny's a licensed speaker for the Daugherty Relationship Institute and offers workshops, courses, and clinical consultation for other providers working with couples. Although her practice is in Illinois, she's an APIT certified psychologist, and she sees couples living in 43 different states. Ginny's been recognized not only for her compassionate and solution-focused clinical work, but also as a skillful instructor and mentor for fellow clinicians. So, Ginny, that's a great background. And what I want to ask first is, what's your story? How did you get into this work in the first place?
Well, that's a great question because, unlike a lot of people in this field, I actually am married, and I am Dr. Wright, and my husband is Dr. Laporte, thus Drs. Laporte, Wright, and Associates. So I have a little bit of a different story, although, like every couple, we've had our ups and downs, and we always face the idea that the marriage may not work. But my original training was in family and child psychology. So a lot of work on what we call systemic therapy interventions. And most of my early career was really working with children and with families. And it was more recently that I came across discernment counseling, recently meaning the last decade. And discernment counseling is a wildly systemic process. And by that, I mean, we are really looking at interaction patterns and how 2 people interact with one another more than an individual vulnerability. And that just really fit my style and my hope as a therapist to work with people, that we're really looking at solution focused and how can the 2 people work together to solve a problem rather than focusing on one person's illness or vulnerability.
So that's really interesting because very often in divorce, one person comes in and they're like, he did this and she did that, and that's why I have to get divorced.
Correct.
So, not really looking at the system or that the relationship having its pros and cons.
Right.
And so who would you say are the typical clients who come to you?
Well, discernment is for a very select couple. It's what we call a mixed agenda couple. And what that means is that one of the spouses is seriously considering divorce. They are leaning out of their marriage, really very close to making that decision, but they have not made the final decision to end the marriage yet. And then the other spouse is leaning into the marriage. They want to save the marriage, and they also want to do couples therapy. The leaning out person, even though they're leaning out, they definitely are not interested in couples therapy. And we know that when a couple tries couples therapy and one person is seriously leaning out of the marriage, they're not sure they want it to work, couples therapy doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so discernment counseling is very specifically for that couple. Again, a leaning out who is has not yet decided to end the marriage, but does not want to work on it in therapy.
That's so interesting, because not wanting to leave and yet not working on it seem inconsistent to me when you hear about it. Like either there, you think of the relationship as almost either or. Do you want to keep the relationship or do you want to end the relationship? But discernment counseling is for that couple that they really, really don't know.
Yeah, especially the leaning out. The leaning out doesn't know. The leaning in presumably has a pretty, even though they've probably had ambivalence throughout their marriage too. I would argue that most spouses probably have at one point or another. But in this moment, the leaning out is the one. And if you think about it, when there's only that binary choice, you stay and you work on it, or you go. That kind of traps people into decisions that may not be either necessary or the healthiest for their family.
So that brings up the question. So what would the third path be? And
So the third,
discernment counseling, right?
yes, and discernment counseling helps couples really choose a path, but discernment opens the door to getting help for a couple when one person doesn't want therapy. So it's much easier to compel someone who's leaning out of the marriage. We're going to do one phone call, and then we'll decide if we want to do one session, and we'll talk more about what discernment really looks like. But it is very short term, and it is inviting to that leaning out spouse who they don't want to get trapped into a long-term therapy when they're not sure if they want to save their marriage.
Right. That's
so discernment counseling just fills a gap that until 10 years ago and more recently, as it's gained more attention, it really does fill a gap for those couples.
So can you explain what discernment counseling is and how it differs from traditional couples therapy or divorce coaching even?
Yeah. So from couples therapy, discernment counseling is not therapy. We are not trying to help the couple fix their marriage, nor are we helping them get through a divorce. We are helping them make the decision about their next step.
Okay.
And we do that by helping each person really get a better understanding very quickly about basically a deeper idea about what did happen in this marriage to get it to the point where divorce is on the table. And very importantly, we help each person see their part in the problems. And we do that by, it's a very short term. I think you mentioned that, anywhere from 1 session to 5. We never set up more than one appointment at a time, because as soon as the discernment is done, they've made a decision about their next step, we're done. Or as soon as one of the spouses is not finding it helpful, we stop. Yeah. Right. But each session is really spent mostly in one-on-one time with each spouse, where we can really dig in to what are the interaction patterns, not the one person problem, but what are the interaction patterns that have developed usually over years. And if we can get them to see a pattern, then by definition, they can see their part, because a pattern means one person does something and then there's a reaction, and then there's a counter reaction to that and another reaction. And it's easy then to point out to each spouse what their part in that pattern is. And with that information, they can make a more clear decision. Is there enough hope in change that it's worth working on the marriage? So the decision is not, by the way, between leaving or staying. It's between leaving, an attempt at reconciliation through therapy, or The other path is basically status quo, postponing the decision for a longer period of time. When they're not ready to do either therapy or divorce after discernment, then they choose path one, which is basically status quo.
Right. So then they're actually in no different place than they were when they started.
I would disagree with that.
Okay.
Right. So our goal in discernment is that they've gained understanding about what's happened.
Okay.
And they have taken more responsibility for their part in that.
Okay.
So couples, I would say about 0% of couples come in thinking they're going to choose path one, right? It is one of the path one is the status quo. Nobody thinks that's what they're going to choose. But it's a great option when they aren't ready to do either of the other two things. And when a couple chooses path one, the status quo, they're no longer in a state of avoidance. They're no longer in a state of I'm defaulting to doing nothing. They have made the active decision, right? We're not ready to call it and end the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't clear about what we'd be trying to fix.
Right.
So we are actively choosing to put it on hold. And with that, most couples will report far less hostility in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They can co-parent so much more clearly because they're not jockeying for who did what wrong in their marriage.
Right.
And many people who choose that status quo also agree to revisit discernment after a period of time, 6 months, a year, something like that.
So it actually sounds like we use the term status quo, but it's not the status quo.
That's correct.
Because they have a different strategy.
Yes.
For remaining in the marriage together.
Yes.
And
I like the term postponing a decision better
right.
than status quo. Yeah.
Right. So, and I sort of like the idea that it's not because they've made a decision. So it's not really postponing a decision, but they are redesigning the status so that they can make the decision down the road.
Correct.
Right. So it's really about a reframe.
Yeah. And ethically, it's just very nice to give someone an option, right? In the past, if someone was unhappy in their marriage and they didn't have hope for couples therapy,
Mm-hmm.
their only option really is to just sit in misery or divorce.
Yeah.
And our goal is to help people have other choices besides the misery of divorce or the misery of marriage as it is.
Right. And so what's really interesting and what I'm hearing, because I'm always thinking I'm very solution focused as well. And I think that's why we get along so well.
Right.
Is that for that couple that chooses status quo, they can work with you and they can work with a coach to help them build new habits and so they can redesign their patterns.
Absolutely. And they may do that together. They may do that separately. We spend, if a couple is ready to choose that, postpone decision path, we spend a little bit of time talking about the parameters of that, what that actually mean. Does that mean it is not a sexual relationship or it is, right? Does that mean that they are mixing money or not? There's new rules because it's a pretty new place to be. But yes, they can, it's not a default in the sense that they just go back to wandering through their relationship. Right. They have more of a plan for sure.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because, I do a lot of work in co-parenting and my program reframes the idea of co-parenting into a business plan so that when you are no longer married, that relationship is over, but you have another residual relationship, which is actually the business of raising your children. Healthy, safe, secure children are the product.
Yep.
So everything we build in terms of patterns and behaviors and mindsets is toward the product of safe and healthy children.
Yep.
And so, yeah. So
one of the things that we hear from couples who've gone through discernment and they choose what we call path 2, which is separation divorce. So it's a sad outcome, but if it is a clear outcome, if they're confident in that's where it's going to go, then we've done our job in discernment. But what we hear is that co-parenting goes much better.
Yeah.
Right. Because they are not trying to, again, to jockey for who's at fault through their children. So
Yeah.
they kind of get past that muck faster and get down to, I love your terminology, the business
Yeah.
of co-parenting.
Yeah, because you have to really reframe your whole thought pattern, because what worked before stopped working.
Right.
And we don't want to continue using the dysfunctional model as we go forward. So,
Correct.
and the emotions are part of what puts the sort of the gunk in the gears of moving forward, if I can use that imagery.
Well, and look, you bring up an interesting thing that we see a lot in discernment are especially leaning out that we would call somebody who sees divorce as liberation, right? They believe that once they get out of this marriage, things are going to be easier, happier, freer. And a lot of times that includes the parents who believe that once the marriage is over, their kids will be delighted. Right. Their kids will be so much better because they're no longer living in this house with an unhappy, set of parents.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's true. And sometimes it's fundamentally not true. It's true when the couple decides to make it true. That's the work that you do, right? You see the couples who decide to make post-divorce a success for their children, but that's not the default outcome.
Yeah, no. And the people I see, are often ordered by the court. So it's not like they decide.
Okay, fair enough.
Because
Right.
What has happened is so dysfunctional, and they keep on running back to court, that they need a stronger impetus to actually do the work. And so what starts out with, I just got to get through this 4-month program, into, wow, not only is my co-parenting relationship changing, but my relationships at work are getting better. And my relationship with my mother is better. So there's a really interesting byproduct of shifting mindset, so that you are approaching your co-parenting as a business. So we're going to go deeper, but now we're about halfway through. So we're going to take a 30-second break to hear from our sponsors. And we're back with Ginny Wright, who is a discernment counselor. In fact, she is a master discernment counselor, one of only very few in the country. When we went to break, we were talking about co-parenting and that element of post-divorce. You had mentioned that people who go through discernment counseling, and when they come to the conclusion that their decision is to divorce, their co-parenting is better. Or that's what they report, that their co-parenting is better. So what do you think it is that shifts people into the mindset that, okay, I took all the steps I needed to take, and I recognize that it's time to move on? Because one thing you also had mentioned, and so this makes it a longer question, but that some people actually think that their children will be delighted when they divorce, so they don't have the stress in the house anymore. But I haven't met one person that actually is true for. And I think most people are worried that they're going to really mess their children up by the divorce, and that's what keeps them in for so long. So what do you think is the thing that helps them recognize that they can do it differently and better?
Well, I think you touched on it when you were talking about your work and how it changes all relationships. So in discernment, again, we work, a lot of our time is spent one-on-one, which means we can be very direct, and we can get to, it's kind of the opposite of what I think people picture therapy being, where we ask about feelings and we ask about, the past and whatnot. We get to the meat of things really, really quickly, including, again, trying to find out what has happened between the two people. So maybe, like you had said earlier, maybe they come in with a big problem, a substance abuse or a mental illness. And in discernment, obviously we respect that that's there, but we talk about how has the couple managed that problem? How have they interacted around that problem? And by focusing on that and then helping them see their part, the truth is the muck, the stuff we bring to our current relationship is the same stuff we probably brought to past relationships. It's the same stuff that we're going to bring to our next relationship, maybe even our friendships and our parenting and our coworkers. And we really help people see the need to take personal responsibility. Right. And it's not personal blame, and people coming in, as you well know, people coming in the throes of marital, conflict, it's all about blame.
Yeah.
Right. It's all about protecting yourself from being blamed or throwing the blame the other way. And I think one of the most powerful things about discernment is that we stop that. And we focus as much as possible. And obviously people are either better or worse at being stopped at it, but, to take personal responsibility for your habits in a relationship. And even somebody who decides to go through, the path 3 therapy with their spouse, they may be doing it in part just to improve their own skills,
Right.
in terms of being a partner in a relationship.
Yeah. I mean, that's really big because, we are built as relational beings. And when one relationship is sick or unhealthy, it affects all of our relationships. And we may not realize that. And it could even be the relationship with ourselves that is sick, that then impacts other relationships. And part of that is your mindset, like your outlook on life. And so a lot of my work is like, I invite people to stop using the terms never and always.
Sure.
Because that, and catastrophizing, going to the worst case scenario. So in the context of discernment counseling, I'm wondering, how do you actually take out the blame? Because if one person is leaning out, they may have already assigned the blame and it's not on them. Or they may be sort of covering up a shame that maybe the blame is on them. So how do you sort of unveil that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, we establish very early with each spouse separately in phone calls, and then again in the first session together, really what we're doing here. And it isn't about healing somebody's internal shame, right? Not about fixing one individual, not even fixing the marriage. It's about kind of figuring out what happened so that they can make an informed decision about the next step. And so, we help people if they're going, and it can be either the leaning out, the person who wants to end the marriage, or the person who's wanting to save it. They both can get pulled into that blame. And obviously we're respectful and we're empathic, and I believe them that is their experience. And what we really need to shift to is a focus on what might you be able to do different.
Yeah.
Because that's where, not to use the cliche term, but that's where the power comes, right?
Yeah.
You are depending on your spouse to change for your marriage to be okay. That's a pretty miserable place to be. It's a very vulnerable place to be. So if we can help people see there's value, it's not about blame, it's about responsibility, accountability, and power to make a difference in your own well-being. So we work really hard, and they'll always drift back to, yeah, but he, yeah, but she.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's true. And I'll even say, again, because we're meeting separately, my job when I meet with your spouse is to hold them accountable. You don't need to do that anymore.
Right.
in this process, you don't need to do that. I'm going to do that on your behalf. Both people are going to take responsibility.
That's really powerful because,
Mm-hmm.
and that also is part of my work as
Mm-hmm.
well, because it's like, what part do you play in this dance? You know, you may
Correct.
think that they're the leader and you're the follower, but if you want to change the dance steps, you have to take charge, and it's where your feet go.
Right. Right.
And so,
And
yeah.
I think the other thing that we do pretty well in discernment is recognizing that these patterns that have developed typically have developed through very small decisions over the years,
Mm,
thousands of decisions over the years to turn away from the relationship instead of turning toward it, or responding this way instead of responding that way. And that neither person wants to be in their role that's
mm,
developed. So, for example, sometimes we see what we would call the parent adolescent
okay.
relationship, right? One spouse is acting more like the parent who's, having to, the person who says, I never wanted to be a parent to my spouse.
Right. Right.
And the other person is behaving more and more childlike. That's a very common pattern. And it's very easy for the person who's taking on the parent role to think, boy, she's getting everything out of doing nothing, right? She's getting, I have to take care of everything. Well, it's really easy for the person who's taking on the child role to think, well, he really loves being in control.
Right.
And we like to kind of point out, when you were walking down the either literal or proverbial aisle, right?
Yeah.
Neither one of you wanted to be in this role, right? As you're walking down the aisle, you are not thinking to yourself, man, I really look forward to the day that I can parent that person,
Yeah.
right?
That's
And that person is not sitting there waiting for you at the end of the aisle going, what I really need in my life is another mother.
exactly.
So I think when people realize they've together created this, that doesn't mean that one person hasn't behaved worse than the other. There's reality in here, of course, but it's human. It's human to end up in these kinds of interaction patterns. So we normalize it. And if people can buy into that notion that there's a pattern that we jointly created, we both now sustain that pattern through our
Right.
behaviors. They are behaviors, and behaviors are changeable.
Right. Right.
Right. And if both people decide, I'm willing to work on my part in that, if both people decide a negative pattern is fixable, it is fixable
It is
if they
fixed.
choose to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a coach who said to me, your thoughts are just your thoughts, which, that sort of blew me away,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, what do you mean my thoughts are just my thoughts? My thoughts are everything. My thoughts keep me up at night. And he said, yeah, but your thoughts are just your thoughts.
Yep.
And you can think other thoughts, and you can empower yourself in different ways.
Yep.
And, that for me, that was like a turning point in my life journey and my coaching journey and in my parenting journey.
Yeah.
Like,
And to take it even a step further, your feelings are just your feelings.
yeah,
Right. And a lot of people, once they feel something, they assume it to be true because feelings are that powerful. So feelings are really just an output of your thoughts.
yeah,
And your thoughts are just your thoughts.
yeah,
Thoughts are, but the difference between feelings and thoughts is thoughts are changeable if you choose to.
yeah.
We have power over our thoughts.
Right. I think I've seen a wheel where it starts, you have your beliefs, and your beliefs lead to your thoughts.
Hmm.
Your thoughts lead to your feelings, and then your feelings lead to your actions. So it's like, where do we shift the pattern? And
Mm-hmm.
of course, it might start with beliefs. Like, if your belief is they're out to get me, and you shift their belief, and you shift that belief, and you say, well, if I step into their shoes, what else could be going on? And
Right.
so a lot of my work is like, maybe see it from another perspective, and then that could shift.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
being fully aware of your own and what
Yeah.
impact it has. So I know when I come into an interaction with my spouse that I'm bringing a lifetime of whatever, being afraid of abandonment or being assuming the worst. or
Right.
maybe assuming the best, and that's not good. But I
Right.
bring into every interaction something that belongs completely to me.
Yeah.
And my partner is their behavior is at least in part a reaction to what I've brought.
Right. Right. I mean, they may have patterns and have the same patterns with lots of people, but you feed the pattern with your own behavior.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. And again, if you can get a couple to really see that and care about it, right? And really want not just to keep an eye on whether the other person is changing, but to say, you know what? At the end of the day, even if my marriage ends, I want to be able to say that I did what I could.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if that means learning a new way and to be more aware of my own contributions, then that's what I'm going to do. Because again, even if I end up in the misery of divorce, it will certainly be less miserable if I can have faith in myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's about learning to trust yourself. I think a big part of not being able to make the decision is that you're not necessarily trusting yourself to be thinking clearly. And
Hmm.
maybe you're thinking that you haven't been able to think of every potential outcome. So you can't take that step to move forward.
Right.
So that keeps you stuck.
Yep. I think that's a fair statement.
So not a lot of people have heard about discernment counseling. So where can they go to find a referral or to learn more about it? Or how can we expand the reach of discernment counseling?
Well, that final question is the $64,000 question for those of people who are
Yes.
older like me. You remember that.
Yeah.
um, we do need to get the word out. I've never met somebody who learned about discernment counseling and thought, well, that's kind of silly. It's a really helpful process. My website that's up on the screen, lwadiscernment.com. I have a lot of information about discernment there. The Doherty Relationship Institute, that is the creator and maintainer of the process, is discernmentcounseling.com.
Mhm.
And of course, there's a lot of information there. The main thing I would say is if you go to that site, and there's a registry of people who have been trained in discernment counseling and have, actually gone through the training and not just read a book. I think that's a great resource because there are a lot of people. Bill Doherty, the creator of the process, wrote a great book on discernment counseling, and it's great, but it has unfortunately made a lot of people believe that's all you need to do
Yeah.
to know what it is. And that's true in every field, right? We always have that risk. But I would go to that website, make sure you're seeing somebody who's listed in their directory, and then ask questions, right? And as we do with any professional, you want to make a call and not be shy about asking questions about someone's experience and so on.
Yeah. Does a person have to be a therapist of some kind to become a discernment counselor?
Yes, the assumption right now, because there's a lot of divorce professionals who have looked into doing discernment counseling, but because there is so much kind of quick systemic thinking, it's not therapy in that it is not changing anything, but it is therapeutically driven.
Right. I would
Yeah.
say it's therapy informed. So that
Yes, I think that's a better word.
right.
Correct.
If the practitioners have the therapeutic background, that's a different background than a coach has, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so, I have different training than you have, even though we're both approaching a scenario,
Right.
but we're approaching it with different perspectives. And that's
Correct.
also what can weave a person's divorce team together, that every person on the team has different specialties.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so when I, talk to people and they're really not sure, I walk them through from a coaching perspective, but then I can refer them to you because they may need different things that I can't offer.
Right. And
And
that raises a question that I have for you, which is, I forget, do you ever see couples together in coaching?
so when I am doing the co-parenting work, I
Right.
do see couples together, but I don't do couples counseling. That's not what coaching is about. And I do believe to a certain extent that when someone seeks coaching, they want someone whose only stake in the process is them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm not an advocate in that way from a legal perspective, but I'm an advocate from a personal perspective. So
Right.
I need to help that person learn how to advocate for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the most part, although I know this is not universally true, the divorce coach role is typically um, an assistant at decision making for a single person. Obviously, the co-parenting coaching is kind of a
Right.
different process, but I think most divorce coaches probably focus on seeing one person.
Yeah.
And that can be incredibly helpful and sometimes all that is needed. And again, discernment counseling comes in really in this clear scenario where they're a mixed agenda couple. One person is seriously leaning out, the other person is not on board. And that person who's leaning out hasn't made the final decision. Then, again, I want to be respectful that some divorce coaches do see both
Yeah.
partners together, but I think discernment kind of fills that hole
Yeah.
largely.
I think so too. I think so too. And it serves a different function,
Hmm.
right? I'm not there to bring a couple together or to move a couple apart. I'm there to help my client find the tools they need to make the decisions that are right for
Right.
them.
And in that way, I'd say we do the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Now, one of the things I would point out is that, again, success for us is not getting people to path through therapy. It's a clarity of whatever the decision is. That said, we do hold kind of the marriage commitment as important. You and I have talked about
Yeah.
this before. And so we're not saying that we hope everybody stays married. What we do hope is that people who have made the marital commitment are open to an effort at
Yeah.
repair. And
Yeah.
of course, some people come to us and they've already been through many rounds of attempts at repair. Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that everybody we see hasn't done that. Most probably have. But that's the lean, is that we're not necessarily hoping that they stay married forever. We hope they consider an effort at reconciliation a worthy effort.
Yeah. And an option,
Hmm.
right? Just at a minimum, that an effort at reconciliation is an option, and that would make them more um, likely to do the process as it's meant to be done.
Correct.
Because
Yep.
you have three options, and so thank you.
Yeah.
So thank
Yeah.
you so much. This has been a great conversation, and I'm glad to shine a light on discernment counseling. And it's really important for people to recognize that it's very different than couples therapy. It's
Yep.
a whole different animal, and it's designed to be a motivator for decisions that are based on real investigation and discovery.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it.
So thanks again, and tell my audience one more time how to find you.
Yeah. So my website is lwadiscernment.com, or on the screen is my email, dr.wright@lwapsych.com. Got a few different websites going on.
I'm sure
But that's, usually the website or email is usually the easiest way to find me.
that's great. And for my audience, you can always find me at lisa@lzlcoaching.com, or just go to my website, www.lzlcoaching.com, and you can book a complimentary 30-minute consult. We can talk about what's going on with you and whether coaching or perhaps discernment counseling is the right next step. With that, I will say goodbye for now, and we'll see you next time on Dishing on Divorce.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Ginny.